Welcome to Esoteric Thoughts. Today, I have the great pleasure in welcoming Priscilla back to the channel. You may remember Priscilla from doing a joint interview with Micah Dank on astrology and astrotheology. Today, Priscilla's going to share with us her own private personal story of her growing up and how she got into astrology and her journey through religion and through numerous church and Israelite denominations. So, Priscilla, over to you.
Hey, hello everybody, and thank you, Esoteric, to having me back here. I am very grateful for this. Okay, so I guess we'll begin where I am from. So I was raised in the Midwest area, Chicago area, and I am Hispanic. Both of my parents were very religious when I was young. My dad was a Baptist, and my mother was a Jehovah's Witness. So you can see how there was already confliction in the household with that. I spent most of my time with my mother. I was the only girl. I have three brothers, and but eventually my dad got my mom to convert, and she started, going to Baptist church with us. So we all went for a while. My dad was a fundamentalist, like skirts to your ankle, turtleneck. Couldn't swear, couldn't listen to worldly things, watch worldly shows. Even my friends were picked for me what I said. I couldn't speak up a lot growing up. My opinions didn't matter. My dad was very controlling. So fast forward, we went through that phase till about 12, and my parents split up. My mother was manic depressed and schizophrenic growing up, and she wasn't medicated. So we went through a lot of abuse. My mother was controlled by my father, so I feel like in turn, she projected that onto the children. And I feel like I got it the worst because I was the only girl, so there was a lot expected out of me. So that's to say that the childhood was very rough. We also grew up not in the best. So, okay, where I grew up, there is over the highway. This is the ghetto as they would call it, and then on the other side is more, yuppie, or of money. We grew up in an area where I could have went to this school over the highway or the other school. So my father chose to put us in the good school. So I went to school with kids that had more than me, and our families, because we were Hispanic, we were really the only. There was only a few Hispanic families in that area, so we were targeted a lot, and it didn't really fit in anywhere. So um, fast forward, that part of my life was really complicated as well. And when I was about 12, my parents split up. My mom couldn't handle the control anymore. She wanted to be free. She didn't want to be in church. She was going through, her midlife crisis, so to speak. I now recognize that as a Saturn return, being that I'm an astrologer. So during that time, my dad tried to hold everything together, and we stayed with him. And for about a year after that, I didn't speak to my mom. I didn't see her. So me as a 12-year-old girl without my mother, yeah, I'm the only girl in the house. That was pretty tough on me. So I turned to the streets. I was kind of emulating my older brother, watching him, and I looked up to him. And he was getting into drugs and gangs, and we were crossing the highway going to Waukegan area, which is north suburbs of Chicago. It's pretty rough, and so I started going to gang parties, and I got into drugs really young. I was about 11 and a half years old when I started doing cocaine. This was a way for me to escape what was going on at home. I was extremely rebellious. Again, knowing my astrology now, I'm Scorpio Sun with Aquarius Mars. No one was going to tell me what to do. So I rebelled. And like I said, I got into drugs really young. So from 11 and a half to 14, I was addicted to cocaine really bad. Like I was really skinny. I was skipping school. I managed to get run-ins with the police. I was put on probation. I spent some time locked up in juvenile hall. I spent two times in a rehab, one for 6 months, one for 3.5 months. I ran from both of them. I mean, I was just all over the place. My parents did try to intervene here and there. They were going through their own stuff, so they tried. My mom tried to move me in where she was living in, the other side of town. And so she tried to put me in school. I was going to school there, but I was barely going to school. I was staying up all night doing drugs, partying. I was barely going. So I had to go to an alternative school for a little while. I got kicked out of there, went back to jail. And then when I was about 15, I found out I was pregnant, and I was still going through the whole probation and jail stuff. But at this point, I was sober. Um, I about 14 years old is when I stopped doing cocaine. What helped me stop? Honestly, I want to say it was just a inner will. It was like an intervention almost. Um, when I was 14, my dad sent me to live in New York in Brooklyn with my aunt, and not the best place to send a rebellious 14-year-old. I got into more stuff there. But the people there weren't doing cocaine. That wasn't a cool thing. So where I was at, the area I was at, that was what people were doing, my crowd. Once I got moved to New York, I couldn't find it. So I just started hanging out with that crowd and doing what they were doing. So that helped me, I think, to kind of stop using drugs, not having having it accessible. But then it also gave me time to be more introspective and really look at myself like, is this what I want to do? So I started comparing myself to women I was meeting, and I started seeing women that were like, especially in New York, I started seeing women with like cars and money. And I was like, I want to be like that. I don't want to be a drug addict. So I think that desire helped me to kind of just stop doing it. Prior to this, like I said, I was in rehab and none of that worked. So, so fast forward, 15, I find out I'm pregnant. And I was pregnant by a guy who was 24 years old. And yes, so at the time, I didn't realize it was a pedophile situation because I'm a young, fast, I'm living my life. I'm looking for the father I didn't have. My dad was very emotionally unavailable growing up. He worked hard, he was strict, and he did not show me affection. And I think that caused me to, start that path of looking for love in all the wrong places. Um, in respect for my father, because I don't want to just say that he was, like it's his fault. I'm not that type of person. I don't like to take blame. For me, or put blame, I like to make sense of everything that happens. So with my dad, I feel like the affection part was because when he was growing up, um, his father was, he was pedophile, and he did some things to his sister. And I think that caused my dad to not know how to get close to me. So I had to grow up very, detached from a father figure. So it was a father that was in the home, but he wasn't there. I was invisible. So I think that caused me to find men really young, trying to fill that void. So I had this thing with where I wanted to be with older men because I wanted to feel protected. So I was attracted to older men that had a foundation, that had money. Regardless of how they brought it in, I didn't care. I'm 15. But you don't think about those things. You don't consider that he's selling drugs or he's doing this or that he potentially can have a lot of other things going on that can be harmful for you and very toxic. You don't think like this when you're 15, you know? Granted, the background I had too. So, find out I'm pregnant. I ended up getting locked up again while I was pregnant. I was homeless at the time. My parents couldn't handle me no more, and I was just going house to house, just living it up. That's how I met this guy, my friend, who was also older than me. She's like, "Oh, I know somewhere where you can stay," because I had nowhere to go that night. She took me to this guy's house, and I stayed with him for about a week. And we started flirting, and I had sex with him, and I got pregnant. He was on house arrest actually, and so he was already going through his court stuff for drugs or whatever or whatnot. And I ended up going to jail. He ended up going to jail, and then I was locked up until I was about 5 months pregnant with my daughter. And I think just the stress of being behind bars, not eating properly, not having a support system, don't know where the dad's at. I'm 15. My life is a freaking mess. It caused me to have so much stress that I don't know if this has to do with what I developed, but I feel like that was a recent part of it. So I developed this thing called preeclampsia and toxin head poison, which caused, basically to sum it up, from my understanding, it is my blood and my daughter's blood weren't mixing. And they were causing, both bloods causing each other to attack. So it was harming me and her while she was trying to develop in my body. So she couldn't get enough feeds. No matter how much I ate, she didn't get enough through the umbilical cord because it's like clogged up. So she wasn't growing. So the diagnosis inside of me was failure to thrive, and they were monitoring her really closely when I got out of jail, and they were every 2 weeks I was going in and getting checked and all that, and then so I was 26 weeks or 27 weeks, and I remember going to an appointment that I had for amniocentesis, and they did an ultrasound, and next thing I know, they're like, you have to go have your baby. I'm like, what? I had no belly. Okay. I was 86 pounds, 5 months pregnant or 6 months pregnant. I was flat as a board. So I go to Evanston Hospital, and I sure enough had to have her that day. And she was born 1 pound. That was very traumatic. I'm 16 at this point. She was born November 26th. And my mom was there. I had some friends and family there. And, that started that part of my life. So when I was 16, I was struggling big time with a 1 pound baby. Didn't have support already from parents. So I was, using the system. I was trying to use housing. I had SSI for my daughter, and I was struggling. So when I was 18, I ran into a friend that I went to middle school with, and I went to her house. She had a beautiful home. Her daughter had a beautiful room, and I'm struggling. I'm looking at this stuff, and I'm like, I want to live like this. What do you do? Where do you work? And she's like, come here. She takes me to her closet, opens the closet, and there's some stilettos about this tall. And I was like, those are the prettiest shoes I've ever seen in my life. So that starts that journey. So when I was 18 years old, I started dancing for my friend. One of the scariest things I've ever done in my life. In our era, as you know, dancing, stripping wasn't promoted to us like it is now. It was very taboo, very behind the scenes, and very quiet. Like, I might have saw once or twice a movie on dancing, but I never was like, oh, this is the occupation I want to do, like girls do now, because it's publicized. It's very marketed very much towards the women nowadays. Very open. Our times it wasn't like that. So to become a dancer was very it was hard, especially coming from a religious background. My mom was a Jehovah's Witness. I went through that for about 5, 6 years of my life. My dad was a fundamentalist Baptist. So, I'm going into these clubs, I'm working, and I'm at the same time feeling so guilty while I'm in this place dancing on these men. I just thought I was like going to hell, the whole nine. Okay. So in my mind, I'm like, I'm just dancing to provide for my daughter, to get me where I want to go, the next step. I'm going to pay my way through school, like most dancers think. I know there's this like um, programming around the ideologies of dancers, but there's not, a lot of the women in there are not drug addicts. A lot of the women in there are not these type of prostitutes or women that just are party wild animals. A lot of women are in there because they have children. There's a lot of women dancing because they are trying to find their way in life, trying to find their inner feminine. Now that I understand on the esoteric level, it's got a lot to do with spirituality. People have not made that connection yet, but get to that a little bit later. So again, I'm dancing 18, 19, 20. During this time, my brother had got locked up when he was, I want to say 18, maybe 17. He was 17 years old, and my brother caught some type of charge that he got sent to juvenile life. So that basically means you have to be locked up till you're 21. So my brother got sent to DOC, and I was dancing, and we would keep in contact through letters. So this is around the time that he started sending me things from a guy named Chaplain Elmore. What was his name? Something like that. And this was a guy that was into Hebrew Israelite. So my brother's learning about this stuff, and as he's teaching me, I'm like, you're in a cult. Like, get out of that, man. What are you doing? Like, we grew up Baptist. No, Jesus is the way. Like, so I did, because I'm a very curious person, I did take the stuff he was showing me, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay, I'm interested. And at this time, I was doing college online. I had gotten my GED when I was 20, paid my way through school while I was dancing at night, got my GED, and then I started going to school, and I wanted to be I got into criminal justice. I wanted to be a cop or something like of that nature. I'm a Scorpio, so it makes sense. We're like, mysterious detectives, and so I wanted to be a cop. So, anyways, my brother is locked up, and he's sending me this stuff, and I'm on, school online, so I would, you know, not pay attention a lot and start surfing the internet for the stuff that my brother was sending me. So I started digging. I got into the whole 12 tribes of Israel. I think what got me was here was something that I actually found that I could fit in because in these tribes, I was a tribe of Ephraim, if I'm saying it correctly, which represents the Puerto Ricans. And so I was like, wow, there's something I can connect with. Oh my God, God chose us. I'm a chosen seed. And somehow I've always known, or I've always felt like the African American culture was God's people. So when I was taught this, I understood it from that level. Like the minorities have a place now. They're chosen. That's why they go through so much backlash in life, right? So this is how I was making sense of it. So it intrigued me and I was attracted to it because of that aspect initially. From there, I think what kept me going in it and really resonating with it was how much new information I was getting, things I never heard before. I'm already naturally curious. I'm into mysteries. So I'm here, I'm deciphering the Bible. I'm showing my mom. I'm like, and during all of this, I'm dancing. Okay. So imagine being split between I want to be holy and I'm over here stripping. It was like the worst pull of my life, but it really helped me to learn how to be multifaceted also. How to turn things on, turn things off, and how to be adaptable. Um, which on the outside people be like, oh, that's hypocritical. But, I don't look at it like that because I feel like we do too much of this when we should be like, we need to be more open to all perspectives of life because everything has a piece of a puzzle. So, anyways, so I'm, being chastised between both of these realities, and I'm going through my own stuff on this side of my life with the dancing world, and meeting all the wrong guys, and I had my little spouts of abusive relationships. Nothing too serious until I got with my husband. But so, long story short, when I was 22, so this is about a year into learning all of this stuff. Not only was I learning about the Hebrew Israelites, but I was learning about FEMA. I was learning about the reptilians. I was learning, mind you, this is 2009. Okay, so I'm learning about all this stuff, and I'm thinking the world's gonna come to an end. The Mayan calendar, like I'm learning everything, just everything's getting thrown at me, and I'm trying to make sense of all this stuff. I sound like this major conspiracy theorist to everybody around me because nobody at this time is really into that stuff. Not, I mean, I feel like I didn't see an influx of people really waking up till after 2012. So here I am in 2008, 2009, digging, digging, digging. My own friends are like, "Girl, get out of the Bible." I ordered the 1611 King James Version Bible. I ordered a Bible concordance, just trying to make sense of Hebrew. So I was trying to teach myself Hebrew. I was understanding. From there, I learned etymology, how to take words and really learn the root meanings and what they mean. So from that, it took me to gematria. I started learning about that stuff. Go ahead.
At this point, were you part of any Hebrew camps?
Not fully. So I did talk with two camps that I was following both simultaneously on Facebook. And I did that because everybody had different aspects. So the thing about Hebrew Israelite is that you have Messianic Hebrew Israelites, and then you have the Black Hebrew Israelites, and you have different sects. Some are very, very radical, to the point where there are some that are like don't even accept the Mexicans, the Puerto Ricans, or the Indians. They're just straight. Oh no, Black people are the only chosen. That's it. Like they won't even take in the Africans because they look at the Africans as Ham, while they're Shem. Okay, so this is all genealogy. You would have to get into that aspect. So here was me learning all this stuff instead of doing my college. So I failed school because I'm over here so intrigued by the occult world, the things that I'm learning now, this underground world. And so I wasn't a part of a sect yet because, like I said, I was simultaneously following two, and I didn't know who was telling the truth. And I've always been very skeptical of things until I have concrete proof. I blame that now on my Mercury and Scorpio. I'm very big on digging deep, and I want to dissect and get to the focal point. So with these two camps, I was like, I can't pick and choose yet. Now I did get to the point where this is gonna sound crazy, but I was wrapping my hair. I was praying East. I was, the Sabbath on Friday evening. I wouldn't go to work. Like it was ridiculous having to live like this. It got to the point where I couldn't even go to work sometimes. I would work once or twice a week because I felt like if I went to work, I'm gonna go to hell. I gotta stop this. I gotta get out of this. Um, so 22 years old, fast forward a year later, I meet my ex-husband. He was, I think, 30 at the time. I'm 22. I'm young. And he was like the man of my dreams. Okay. But he was a street guy. And I'm in this Hebrew stuff. So I'm like, in my mind, I'm the damsel in distress that wants to save a guy, like all of us women do when we're young. So I am like, oh, I'm going to convert this guy. I'm going to make this bad boy into this Hebrew king guy for me. So that went completely south because the 10 years I spent with him was awful. He was extremely abusive. I ended up having a son with him when I was pregnant. I was under the impression that he had two children. I met both of his kids. We lived together for a little bit. And when his son one day was over, he was about 12. We were watching cartoons and he was like, my dad has like 10 kids, right? I was 7 months pregnant. Mm-hmm. So this is where I find out that my ex-husband was actually, well, he wasn't my husband then. I was only with him about a year, got pregnant. Should have did a background check, but he was in, which is why he was so familiar with dancing and why he liked me. So he already preyed on me from the beginning, and I didn't know what he was doing. He was older than me. He was already in this world. So he was very, he knew what he was doing. He was, he had already been in the dancer world. He had dancers in Texas, and he was considered a pimp out there. So I find out he has 14 children. I made baby mother number 9. I have his last child right now. So anyways, my son is now 12. So he was physically abusive. When I was about 4 or 5 months pregnant, he was whooping my ass. Like it got bad. Got bad to the point where I had to get away from him. And I moved from where I was living in Waukegan, Illinois, right outside of Chicago. I moved to Kenosha, Wisconsin, over the border. Because I was pregnant. I didn't want to dance anymore. I was in the Hebrew Israelite stuff. And in Kenosha, the public aid there, it gives out a lot of money where you can actually they give you bus passes so you can get to and from work. At this time, I didn't have a car. I was with this guy, and with all the abuse, controlling my money, telling me what to do, I was really just like, I was hitting bottom, basically. And so I'm like, I got to get away from this guy because I'm having a kid. I have my older daughter. I've got to get back on my feet. And then at the same time, I'm dealing with the Hebrew Israelites. And, they're telling me, well, you need to be submissive to your man. So don't make him mad. Don't make him mad. And I'm like, I'm not making him mad. So, and this is part of what turned me off the Hebrew Israelites because a woman in that life doesn't have voice. Okay. You're not allowed to teach. You're not allowed to speak up. So they were telling me, don't speak up to him. Don't, and I'm like, I'm not doing anything. He's just abusive. So long story short, I move away. He goes to prison for some case he caught, and he was gone for 2 years. And I waited around on the phone, stupid little me, like most girls do when they're dealing with these bad boys. And when he got out, we got back together. And this is where I tried to convert him into the Hebrew Israelite stuff. I mean, there was days he literally would argue with me about Jesus, and he would just punch me because he did not like that I was talking about his Jesus. Because I was trying to teach him, like, Jesus isn't the proper pronunciation of it because there was no J in the English language.
So what was he? Was he a Christian?
So he was deep Christian. Yes, his mom was, I believe she was a Christian. Yeah, and he was like, he reverenced his mother. Like he looked up to his mother. He had to do everything his mom said. Like it was all about impressing his mom. So if I talked about any of that stuff, he would literally be upset with me. Like, don't talk to my mom about that stuff. We're not going to talk about this. So you couldn't talk about his beloved Jesus. So if you talked about Jesus, he was pissed. And it was a struggle because I felt compelled. Like it was on my heart. Like I got to teach this guy this stuff. I got to help him. I got to get him out of the things he was doing. He was already struggling. So I found out that he was using heroin. He was selling it, but he ended up getting a table habit. So about 2 or 3 years in of our relationship, I noticed a change. Like he got very skinny, and he would do what they call nodding out. things like that. And I started picking on, like, he wanted a lot of sugar all the time. His eating habits changed. I mean, there was a time that he, for lack of better words, he shit himself, and I had to like help him clean himself up and all that. So, you know, I put two and two together, asked a few people. I'm in the dancer world. I've seen drug addicts in there. I had already experienced so much. I figured he was using heroin. He never admitted it to me until about years later. So fast forward, when I was 29, my Saturn return was awful. Through all the abuse, through the Hebrew Israelite stuff, being chastised, feeling like I'm going to go to hell because I strip for a living, not really being able to find my way, not having family support, just all the trauma that I experienced. 29 came, and October 10th of 2016, which was right before my 30th birthday, was my 29.5 year. I was 29 and a half. This is when Saturn orbits back, and Saturn is karma. Saturn comes to take something out of your life that is no longer serving you, but it can bring karma. And so how I kind of put this two and two together was, this is why all of this happened. So at this time, my ex-husband was locked up for beating me up really bad. He was gone for a year. He came out, and I right before my birthday. And that summer, everything was good. He wasn't hitting me, and I found it very awkward. He was really off in what he was doing. I'm very observant. I follow patterns, and so I'm like, there's no way in hell you change so fast. I knew something was up. So I started getting dreams. This is where I realized I was psychic. This is where I realized I had a really very strong intuition, and to learn how to trust my gut. I started having dreams that I had this one dream that my older daughter was being touched by him. And I would go to work, and mind you, I danced at night 5 days a week, and he would watch the children. And I was at work, and I would feel like, he's cheating on me. Something's going on. Something's wrong. And I would ask my boss, like, can I leave? And I would leave early to like sneak up on the house to see if I'm either catching him doing drugs, sleeping with a woman. There was something, like, my soul was telling me it's time to go. It's time to go. He's not going to change. Something's going on. Like, I was already ready to leave. Through all the 10 years of drama, I was ready to just get away from him. I should say 8 years. It was about 8 to 9 years. So anyways, this one day I just knew that I had a dream about it. Okay. And then that couple days later, my youngest daughter and me, we were getting ready, and she's like, Mommy, she was 3. She's like, Mommy, I saw Daddy kiss Jeanine in lips. And I was like, what? And I'm like how, and she showed me. And so I said something to him. I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, well, you know how kids are. It's just, whatever. My daughter was 12 years old. Okay. So come to find out, I had this feeling. I don't know how to explain it. It's like I knew. Once I had that dream, I knew something was going on. And I had to get down to the bottom of it. I was like, no, I got to get her out of the situation. If this is what's happening, I need to, like, get her out of the situation. So I prayed about it one day. I was bawling. I was in the tanning bed. I won't ever forget this. And I was bawling my eyes out. And they were in the car, and he was in the car with them. Got out of the car. I got in the driver's seat. I drove home. And I don't know, I just got the strength, and I was like, get out of my car. I'm going to talk to my daughter one-on-one. So I can tell he was nervous, and his energy shifted. Like, he knew that I knew something. So he went inside. I locked the doors. I turned around, and I asked my daughter what happened. She told me. And I was like, I saw red. I was enraged. I wasn't even scared. Like, I was very terrified of him before because he was so abusive. But at this point, I wanted to kill him. I just did not care. I did not care. So the first thing I did was I called his mother. I don't know. And I told her. She's like, please don't hurt my son. I don't know. Hung up the phone. I got my kids out of the house. And yeah, I ended up, this is crazy. You told me to be raw, so I'm going to be as raw as possible in this story. I ended up stabbing him in his leg. Because I lost it, and he took off running. He went on the run for about a year in Florida. I called the police that same day. They had like audio, video, and they were asking me everything, so they recorded everything. I up and picked up my house and moved in 2 days, and I moved back home to Chicago. At this time, I was living in Kentucky, and he had ran anyways. I knew he was going to Florida because his sister had just moved to Florida, so I told the cops he's going to be in Florida. I tipped them off already. So during that process for that whole year, this was 2017, I had to record him on a call every time he called me because he would call and harass me. At this point, it was either calling, harassing me, drop the charges, I'm going to kill you, I love you, I'm so sorry, she's lying, everything, just all of it. And a year of this, I had to record these calls. I recorded a lot of these calls. And we did it on purpose because in Kentucky, it's a two-way state, meaning that you can record legally without someone's permission. And this is the only way we were going to be able to get him for like omission of guilt or whatever. And sure enough, he told on himself on recording. This is what we used in court. That and some photos and some other evidence that we had. So he got prosecuted to 15 years, February of 2018, and I had already moved back to Chicago at this time. So this was the moment that trauma is what opened me back up to astrology. During the Hebrew Israelite stuff, like when I was 26, 27, 28, that's when I started getting into the other cults, like the Messianic Israelites. And in those cults, they teach more astrology. They teach, the numerology and how Enoch and all of this stuff goes together. So that sparked up astrology for me because I already loved astrology as a little girl. I'm not sure. I think on our other interview I talked about this, but when I was a little girl, my mom would watch the Spanish channel, and they had an astrologer on there, Walter Mercado, and so I admired this man so much. He was so flashy. He wore capes, and he would always talk about all the signs, and I would stay up at night waiting for Scorpio. I got to hear Scorpio. So I already had this familiarity with astrology, and I always had it popped up a lot in my life. All witchy stuff, all occult. When I was, 11, 12, I was a witch, everything that little girls do. I feel like that the whole understanding to witch to me is the feminine. It's the dark feminine that is suppressed, that we already resonate with, but we don't know how to make sense of it because it's closed off in society. So astrology was very big in my world already. So was herbs. So was all of these things that in cats, and I didn't know how to make sense of it. But so when I started learning astrology with Hebrew Israelite people, that kind of took me down that rabbit hole to kind of get me off of the Hebrew Israelite stuff. That's how I got more into the occult, and I started learning, just researching. So when I had all this stuff happen with my ex-husband and we split up, and I'm going to the courts with my kids, and I'm just trying to get me and my kids back on a foundation, get us all back to normal. In the process, I think to deal with the pain that I felt, I just started to learn, just put my energy into learning, and astrology popped back up for me. So from 30 till about 34, I got really deep into astrology, and I met a lady who was doing Uranian astrology. So it's not even popular astrology. She does a very more complex aspect of it, and it's more progressive, it's more new. But she was teaching me basic Western astrology. And then she took my chart and she's like, you are an astrologer. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, Uranus is on your midheaven. And, she just starts going through the little things. And she's like, this is what you should be doing. So she sparked this for me. And I was really scared at first. I was like, I don't want to be an astrologer. It's like, well, people aren't going to take me serious. I'm a stripper. I come from the ghetto background, and I don't have much education. And everything was like, I lived a really rough life, and I have a lot of skeletons in my closet, a lot of things that I've been through. And she's like, that's perfect. You'd be perfect to be an astrologer. People need people with experience. They don't need textbook people. And I was like, what? So I started to do it with friends, close people. I started on Facebook. I would just throw things out there and just teach people. And I noticed that I was getting a lot of comments. People were really interested. They were really intrigued. So from there, I started teaching numerology, and I would tie in psychology. I would tie in colors and vibrations, and I would tie in so much stuff and just teach and teach and teach that it grew for me. It just became this domino effect. So then these doors started to open up, and I just took the advice of my mentor. I just went ahead and I was like, you know what? I'm going to start an astrology business. And that is how Spirit Coaching Astrology developed. I just one day went out there and did it. I made a Facebook page first, started doing readings for all my friends. When I kept getting good feedback, when I kept getting oh my God, that was accurate, or I started seeing things I would tell somebody, in a month before this is going to happen, and we would see something kind of happen that way, I was just like, okay, I know what I'm doing. So I started taking classes through different astrologers just to learn other people's techniques. Um, because there's so many different astrology tools you can use. There's not just like astrology is a genre, right? And then you have so many levels of it. So I started learning like Hellenistic. I wanted to learn like how to do, Western versus Vedic, the difference between sidereal versus, and I thought that was really important because I didn't want to come out here and teach people and learn, or, help people learn and just have like one basic aspect of it. I feel like all perspectives matter when it comes to astrology. So I try to tie it all in. So yeah, that's how I got to where I am today. You can go ahead, you can chime in.
Sure. So going back, the Black Hebrew Israelites, because they had the particular one that you were following, because they had the 12 tribes chart, you were welcomed in. But during the problems you had, they there was no support at all for you.
Oh no, not at all. And I think that really made me realize like this is not a community that I want to be a part of, for one. For two, when they would shun the women so much, it was always about women are bad. Look at the Bible says women are this, women are that. Women are cursed. That's why they get periods. Women, that's why they have to have babies. They're beneath men. But I'm like, this doesn't make any sense because I'm learning on a science level as well on my own time. I'm learning about chromosomes. Like I'm learning the woman chromosome versus the guy chromosome. I'm learning about, genealogy now. Where I'm starting to understand the history of supposedly the first woman was a European, Ethiopian woman. So I'm like, well, how is it that we're beneath the man, or we're to be submissive to a man if a woman has a longer time on Earth? I don't understand that. Then I think what really did it for me was when I learned about the spirit of wisdom, um, which they call, I want to say it was King Solomon, he called her Sophia, which is the name. So when I started learning etymology and I started learning about Sophia, which is wisdom, that's the name for the wisdom, our gut feeling, our intuition, wisdom, our understanding, right? When I started learning that it was a feminine energy, I'm like, well, if we're beneath men, how are we the wisdom? And why do we have to be closed off? Why can't we teach? Why do we have to shut up? Why, if we're the ones that are the nurturers and you go through mommy first as you're growing up, then why do we not matter? I think that turned me off to it.
What about any relationships or support from other women who were Israelites with you?
So what I noticed about that was a lot of the women I did deal with in that cult group, whatever you want to call it, they were already married to someone, and they were already very submissive. They were all very, very much brainwashed or indoctrinated into that. And so a lot of them did not support me, for one, if they knew that I was a dancer. They did not support me because I wasn't fully married properly. Um, I was wild and radical. I was out of the box. So a lot of them would try to push their projections on me, like, you should dress a little different. Your Facebook's a little provocative. Don't you think it's wrong that you're making men be enticed? And I'm like, well, don't you think it's wrong that they want to be enticed? Like, because I'm a dancer on the other side. So, we didn't get along in that sense. And I didn't feel support from those women because I was different. And I didn't fit in that mold of this submissive, quiet. I wanted to teach. My desire was to teach because I have a lot to teach. I have a lot to tell people. I don't see it that way. And it was from my experiences, but it wasn't allowed.
So how easy was it for you to actually leave the cult?
I want to say for me, it was really easy only because I've always been someone that doesn't like to be moved in anything. Even though I've had that feeling like, oh, I fit in, like, oh my God, Puerto Ricans are on this thing. It was more so like, wow, okay, here's something I can collectively be with. You know what I mean? But I don't like to feel boxed in. I never did, even as a child. So the moment I started to feel like, I was just the ultimate sin, this bad person, it just turned me off. It made me feel like this can't be right because if God, as they say, God created, Adam and Eve and created man and woman, we should be equal. That why is there a difference here? You know what I mean? So I just felt like they were pushing the same ideology of the church, the religion, like Christianity church, but just in a spin. I didn't like that.
So when you made the transition away from the Israelites and you got deeper into astrology, how did your perception of God change?
Such a great question. Drastically. So through church, through my life, through the Hebrew Israelite, my idea of God was a masculine. It was a male that was in space somewhere or past space. That I always understood it was a spirit, but also can be physical. So if it came down to the physical aspect, it was a masculine. When I got into astrology teaches something completely different. Astrology teaches both masculine and feminine. And it teaches that there's gods and goddesses. I never had heard this before. So I was always told, astrology, witchcraft, all that is witchcraft. It's evil. Stay away from it. But I started to make sense of it. Like, okay, this is why they say this. They don't want people to know that there is feminine gods, that there is feminine power, that there is, duality. That's the yin and the yang. So I found that really opened up my concept of what God was and who God was. I understood it now at this point from duality, and I was no longer afraid of these conspiracies of like the Baphomet with the guy that sits like this. I mean, I was deathly terrified of that stuff. I'm thinking there's witchcraft. I'm thinking people are going to put satanic spells on me, and even if these things are going on, right? I started to not have that fear anymore, because I started understanding the power when the feminine principle got brought in. I saw the balance. I saw my power. I didn't feel helpless anymore. I think a lot of it was feeling helpless because there's no space for the feminine. That's that they make us think that we're irrelevant. It changed drastically.
During from the age of, you said 11 and a half, when you started on drugs right the way through, did you ever have any external counseling, or was it something that you fought through yourself?
I did. So, like I said, when I was 13, I went to my first rehab, and I was there 5.5 months. I didn't do well because I never did anything. I've always been that way. You can't tell me what to do. I'm not going to do it. Um, but I did when I was in those groups, even though I acted like this badass, I did pay attention. I heard things. I've always been very, I hear the things that are going on. So there's stuff I would take in. I did have a therapist. Her name was Angie, and we did talk through things. She did try to help me see a different perspective of life. I had my probation officer who would try to talk to me, try to help me, mature and have a deeper understanding of what I was going through. And then again, when I was 15, or no, 14, nope, 15, because I was pregnant, I went to the rehab again, even though I was sober at this point. So I had that intervention as well. But honestly, no, I think I fought through all of that alone, really. I was always with older people, so I took the wisdom of the older people, even if they were using drugs with me, even if they were out there just living their lives. All my friends when I was 12, 13, 14 were 24, 25, 26. This is the crowd I hung out with. Um, and, my mom even hung out with us. My mom wasn't the greatest influence. She was going through her own demons, her battles with her schizophrenia, her depression. She went through her life. She had her kids young, got with my dad, was with him 17 years, never had a life, broke free. So she was living it up. She was more like a sister to me. So I didn't have that support, um, really from anyone, no real therapy. I think it just had enough wisdom to know what was important when I heard things. I gotta say I was very, very lucky and very protected because I mean this is like telling my story like in this small amount. It's like there's so much far in between that I am very lucky to be here today. I'm very grateful that I've survived a lot of the things I've survived.
So as part of your journey into astrology, you began to learn astrotheology.
Mhm.
So
So
how did that make an impact on your understanding of God and everything that you had learned from a religious perspective?
I think so I was already learning about astrotheology with the Hebrew Israelites because they were teaching how astrology is in the Bible, right? But I had not put it together as in a like the broad spectrum, like the whole world is based on this, you know? And it wasn't until I got deeply into astrology later on when I was trying to start my business, when I met Micah in that group, that I started to really understand on a broader level how everything is literally astrological. Everything is based off these numbers and these patterns. Um, but that opened my world so much on a level where it freed me. It freed me in my mind. It freed me in my soul. It made me unafraid. I'm not afraid to live now and have experiences. I don't guilt trip myself for things anymore. I understand that these things have to happen, whether good or bad. I just try to find a lesson in them. I'm not afraid of God no more. Like I'm not afraid that God's going to come throw me in hell, which is great because it makes me have a closer love relationship with source, which was so important. It's so important for all of us. I think religion, all of that is so bad in a sense where it closes you off. It traps you into the level of fear, and that vibration is where they want you because they can just siphon from you all the time. You know, the government, whoever is doing this crazy stuff, the programming.
For anybody watching this video, especially if any women who have experienced any aspect of what you have been through, what advice would you give to them?
Listen to your gut and your intuition. Always listen to yourself because you always know. I cannot stress that enough. I've heard that so much growing up. I used to be like, huh, what do they mean by that? No, we know. As women, we know we're very powerful. Go with your first instinct, go with your gut, and trust yourself. Um, and put yourself first. That is one of my biggest things. I was a people pleaser. I never put myself first. I didn't love myself. I didn't love who I was, what I looked like, where I came from. And I think my best advice is to really embrace every walk of your life. It's all needed.
Priscilla, thank you. You've been very brave to share your personal story, your personal journey. Thank you very much.
I appreciate you having me here.